Calix Boxing in the building. I am live. Quick lunchtime live. It's a quick lunchtime live. Thanks to everybody that's going to be tuning in on YouTube and on Twitter, pushing in on 800 followers on Twitter, closing in on 5,000 subs here on YouTube. So appreciate all the support and all the archive views as well and comments. Appreciate that. But I wanted to do this one because I just saw the interview that Tyson Fury did on TalkSport over across the pond, and false narratives need to be pushed back on. And it was just funny watching this one, and especially because there's no reason to do it. There's just no reason to do it. Let me try to close something that just popped up. There we go. Nope, it popped up again. All right, I'm good now. Tyson Fury claims he's already been the undisputed champion. He's already been the undisputed champion, according to his interview with TalkSport. More on that in a minute. Let's get to some comments. Y'all hit the like button as y'all come in. OJ22, appreciate the support as always. Appreciate Westside in the building. What's good, champ? And G Funky as always. Appreciate that. We got to do a collab pretty soon, G Funky. It's been too long. What a joke Fury is saying he's already been undisputed. I don't know, man. I find the easiest things just make me laugh. And this one made me laugh. And I saw it. I was like, oh, I got to talk about this. False narratives need to be pushed back on. And it's just funny at the same time, too. Because he knows the difference between undisputed and unified. He knows that he was never the undisputed champion. That he knows that Usyk isn't a blown up middleweight that he would just slap around the ring. Maybe he believes that he slapped him around the ring, but that he's a blown up middleweight. Come on. So let's get to the comment that I'm focusing on here. He talked to TalkSport and he says, it's never going to happen because I'm retired. Fine. If you want to retire, retire. I'm no person to tell another grown man when he shouldn't retire. As a fan, I can say where that fighter's legacy will be if he retires, as opposed to where his legacy will be if he becomes undisputed champion. I can talk about that. It's fair for me to talk about that as a fan. But if he wants to retire, then retire. But he can retire without falsehoods. He can retire without slandering other champions. So when he throws out he wants to retire, and then on top of that adds these falsehoods that we're going to highlight, it makes him look insecure, in my opinion. If you want to retire, just retire. It's fine. It could be leverage, also fine, but no need to add this other stuff. And let's get to the rest of the comment. But I'd punch him around the ring. And he's talking about Usyk. He's a middleweight blown up. We'll get to that in a minute. But this is what I wanted to touch on immediately is I've already been the undisputed champion. I've won every single belt there is to win. I've got nothing more to do. I am out. False. In my Maury Povich voice, the lie detector test shows that is not true. That is not true. You were never the undisputed champion of the world. And you can't just... A key component of being the undisputed champion of the world is actually to have been the undisputed champion of the world at some point. And he was never the undisputed champion of the world. So you can't just go around saying and flexing and saying, I was the undisputed champion of the world, because you never were. You weren't. And I know I'm going to be called a bloody wanker and a dosser for this and all kind of names. I like Fury. I like him. I think he's a great fighter. I think he holds up with other all-time greats as far as head-to-head matchups. Is he in my top 20 all-time? I don't know, maybe on the fringe of that right now. But in order for him to climb those rankings, he can stick around and become undisputed. And I think that's a big part of this is, look, dude, you can't say you're the undisputed champion if you were never the undisputed champion. You were a unified champion. You had the IBF. You had the WBA, you had the WBO when you beat Klitschko, but when you stepped away from the sport for the mental health issues, those belts got vacated. and you came back and won the WBC. But just because you won all 4 belts at some point, that doesn't make you undisputed. You were unified at some point. You were never undisputed. In order to become undisputed, the key component of it is you have to hold all the belts simultaneously. And look, Tyson Fury knows that. He knows that. And that's what I'm trying to highlight here is shout out Chicano Prophet, shout out D-Style Boxing, Fury with good old-fashioned inaccurate statement. And I don't think it's a slip of a tongue. I don't think that Tyson Fury meant to say, I was the unified champion. He knows the difference between unified, undisputed. This is Tyson Fury talking out his head again, trying to claim that he was something he wasn't. And the sad part about this, he doesn't have to do that. He's a great fighter already. He's proven a lot already. But the key is he knows that everybody is asking for this undisputed fight, and it's only going to grow and grow and grow. And if he wants to retire, like I said, just retire. Just retire. But there's no need for the inaccurate statements, the falsehoods, and dragging Usyk through the mud in the process. You can't claim, look, dude, I can say that I'm the mayor of New Orleans, but I'm not the mayor of New Orleans. I'm just not. I wasn't the 2021 NFL MVP. I can claim I was, but I wasn't. I'm not the king of the magical magical garden gnomes. I'm not. I can claim I was, but I'm not. And he was never the undisputed champion. He just wasn't. He thinks he's still in possession of belts he won from Klitschko, and having won the WBC from Wilder makes him undisputed. Possibly. Like, Fury knows how this works. It's just him trying to push this narrative that he doesn't need to add to his legacy. His legacy is already complete. Right? I already had the belts that Usyk has. I don't need to do that again. Why do I need to do that again? I have the WBC. Why do I need to fight for the IBF, the WBA, the WBO? I don't need to do that. I had those belts already. That's my sloppy leftovers. Usyk's got my leftovers. I've already had that. I've already got them all. I'm undisputed. No, you're not undisputed. And when we talk about all-time great heavyweights, where we always need to start is each particular era. And first we have to define what an era is, right? Because boxing fans do this thing where they just throw out names and say, oh, this is the best fighter of this era. This is the top 5 fighters of this era. But they never define what the era is. And the era is different for each weight class because it has a lot to do with the last great fighter of a particular era and then a vacuum that happens because of them stepping away, retiring, or losing. To me, this heavyweight era started when Lennox Lewis retired. Anything after Lennox Lewis's retirement started this heavyweight era. So in this era, you had 3 great heavyweights. You had the Klitschko brothers and Tyson Fury. So when we look for separation with these fighters, what do we look for? We look for consistency. Number one, Vladimir Klitschko had the most consistency out of those 3 great heavyweights. He just did defense after defense after defense, win after win after win, dominated pretty much every round of a lot of those fights until Tyson Fury beat him. So what do we look for? Head-to-head matchup. So we have Vladimir Klitschko's consistency versus Tyson Fury, not as consistent, inconsistent fighter, only 33 fights, a lot of inactivity there. But he has a head-to-head win against Vladimir Klitschko. Some people would favor that. Some people would favor the consistency. But one thing Tyson Fury can do in order to end this conversation of who is the best fighter of this era is to stick around one more fight and do something that neither Klitschko brother did. Do something that the other 2 great heavyweights of his era, only 3 great heavyweights in this era, Fury, Klitschko, Klitschko. The other 2 guys, the 2 Klitschko brothers, never became undisputed. And they never became undisputed because they were blood. And I've been told for years that because they were blood, they could never fight each other. That we had to have this 2-headed monster in the heavyweight division because these 2 guys, number 1 and number 2 in the division, couldn't fight each other. Couldn't fight each other because they shared the same household for a part of their life. So what can Tyson Fury do to create that separation and become the greatest heavyweight of his era and climb all-time heavyweight rankings? He can become undisputed. And he knows that. And that's why he's trying to claim he's undisputed without actually becoming undisputed. I had all the belts. I had them. I had all the belts. I had those belts Usyk has right now, so I don't need to fight for him again. That's his claim. In making that claim, he's trying to historically put himself above the Klitschko brothers. Look, Tyson Fury's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. Tyson Fury knows boxing history. He knows his competitors. And he knows that if he makes the claim that he's undisputed, maybe some people will buy it. Just maybe. But the problem with that is, in order to become undisputed, you actually have to become undisputed. You have to hold all the belts simultaneously. And he can do that. He's one fight away from doing it. So that brings me to this point. He has to go change his name to a Lennox Lewis. Dude is losing his mind. I hear AJ is a bigger fight for Fury than Usyk. What do you think? Yeah, I mean, AJ would be the bigger fight if he had the belts. Tyson Fury for Anthony Joshua for undisputed is a bigger fight than Tyson Fury versus Usyk for undisputed. Right? The problem with that is Fury just fought Dillian White for $33 million in front of 94,000 fans. So people see that and they see Usyk would be a bigger fight than that for all the marbles for that. So you make 40 million plus for that fight. Where are you going? Where are you going? Sit down. Where are you going? Why are you taking off? 40 million, 94,000 fans for all the belts? Why are you going so fast? So it makes you wonder why. It makes you wonder if AJ had the belts, would Fury's energy be different right now? When I hear a comment like, he's a middleweight blown up, but I'd punch him around the ring. He's not a middleweight blown up. Usyk and Fury once again knows this. So it makes you, when I hear falsehoods, I hear insecurity. So I wonder why I'm hearing insecurity from the heavyweight champion of the world, lineal heavyweight champion of the world. Why? Why is his energy this way when it comes to Usyk? Usyk became cruiserweight champion and then heavyweight champion in less than 20 fights. Usyk consolidated 7 of the 8 major belts in the 2 divisions that he's competed in less than 20 fights. In the process, he beat a top 3 heavyweight. Some people even think top 2 in Anthony Joshua. He's got 3 of the 4 major belts. If we're counting the ring belt, he's got 3 of the major 5. And Fury hasn't fought him yet. Fury's only 33 years old. Fury's only 33 fights into his career. So we have to ask ourselves why. Why is he so eager to get out the door? And maybe, and these are fair questions. Like I said, I'm nobody to tell anybody when they should retire. I just have to ask. Like I have to start mathing the math and putting 2 and 2 together and wondering why he's so eager to get out the door when there's a big money fight on the table for undisputed. Why is it that he's claiming that he's undisputed when he's not undisputed? When everybody wants him to fight for undisputed, all of a sudden he's claiming that he already did that. Why? Lineal and current Ring Magazine champion. He just like to hear himself talk, even if it's nonsense. He needs a few title defenses if he were to become undisputed. I don't know about that. To me, if he finishes off his career undisputed, he's the best heavyweight of this era. He then separates himself from Vladimir Klitschko. That's the separation he has to make at this point is, do you go off of head-to-head, Fury beating Klitschko, or do you go off of Klitschko's consistency throughout his career? And you can go either way. That separation hasn't been made, is my point. And there's one way he can create that separation is the Klitschko brothers refuse to fight each other for Undisputed. That fight was always one fight off. And Vladimir and Vitaly refused to give us that because they were blood. They were kin. Some people would say that's fair. Some people would say it's not. And we can debate that till the cows come home. But they never became undisputed. Tyson Fury can become undisputed. It just seems like he doesn't want to. And it seems like he's trying to make the claim that he's already done it when he hasn't done it, which makes me think, why is he doing that? Told y'all he's scared of Usyk. See, this is what I wonder. Scared is a strong word. Ducking is a strong word. I'm just saying, like, it just seems like the energy is different when it comes to Usyk than it would have been when it came to Joshua, than it was when it came to Wilder. Why is the energy different when it comes to Usyk? Why the falsehoods? Why the blown? We all know he's not a blown up middleweight. He never competed at middleweight. Competed at cruiser and heavyweight. That's falsehoods. That's a false narrative. I've already become undisputed just because I held all the belts at some point. Another falsehood. Why? Why? He knows the difference between undisputed and unified. He knows that. He knows that just because he held the belts that Usyk has, that he already held it, that doesn't make him undisputed. That doesn't mean he doesn't have to fight for those belts again. Boxing is littered with examples of guys fighting for the same belt after they lost the belt. Just because you held that belt at some point, that doesn't make you the WBA champion forever. You're not the WBA champion right now. You're the WBC champion. So how are you the undisputed champion when right now you hold the WBC? How are you the undisputed champion when you held the WBA, WBO, and IBF? You never held the WBC when you were holding those belts. You got to hold them all at the same time, be undisputed. I hate when these fighters talk that stuff, but don't fight the guy they talking about. He'd punch him around the ring. Will show us. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. We have to keep the same energy for all the fighters because I like Tyson Fury. I enjoy watching him fight. I think he's a great fighter. I think when we talk about the all-time great heavyweights, head-to-head, as far as one night, like as far as going in there and executing a game plan that could possibly beat a Larry Holmes, possibly beat a Joe Frazier, you could say he'd be in all those fights because of his size, because of what he's able to do, because he can morph himself into whatever he needs to be on that particular night. He's a versatile fighter. He can fight many different game plans. And oh, by the way, he has a great chin that holds up. And oh, by the way, he can punch. He can sit on his punches. He has knockout power. It holds up, but the resume has to be there. And the resume is not there when it comes to other all-time great fighters. So when we're talking about all-time great lists, we talk about greatness, not who's better, who is greater. And right now, we can't say Fury is greater than those heavyweights when those guys went through a lot more fire than Tyson Fury. The only all-time great heavyweight that Tyson Fury beat was Vladimir Klitschko. But if he sticks around one more fight, if Usyk defeats Joshua again, to me, that makes Usyk a great heavyweight. All-time great heavyweight? I don't know. That'll tell over time. But my point is, we look for separation in a particular era first. And as of right now, Fury hasn't separated himself from Vladimir Klitschko yet. Yes, he beat him head to head, but Vladimir Klitschko, consistency over time depends on what you want to go with. But there's one way he can separate himself. He can actually become the undisputed champion of the world. He can actually achieve that. He can actually achieve the defeat of lineal champion, WBC champion, and then, oh, by the way, winning the IBF, WBO, WBA again. He can achieve those feats. Multiple championships, and then all of the championships at one in the four-belt era. It's not easy to do, and he can do it. He can do something that neither Klitschko brother did. He can do something that no heavyweight in his era did. He can do something that nobody's done in over 2 decades. And that climbs him up pound for pound. I mean, all-time heavyweight rankings and even all-time pound for pound rankings if he were to be able to do it. But he's got to do it. He can't just claim that he did it. You can't claim that you're something you're not. Like, Kyrie Irving can't claim that he was a 2021, 2022 NBA MVP. He didn't do it. He didn't do it. Like LeBron can't claim he's the forever MVP because he was the MVP last year or the year before. He can't do it. Mr. Boxing Today, and this is the guy to go to for heavyweight boxing talk. And I trust his opinion on this more than anyone. First, Mayweather, now Fury claiming they were undisputed without actually achieving. That's what I'm saying. Like, I can't claim I'm the mayor of New Orleans. Like, I can't do it. Yeah, I'm the mayor of New Orleans. No, I didn't win an election. I didn't even run for mayor of New Orleans. But you can't claim you were something that you never were. Like, dude, winning belts in the past that were taken from you. You never held 4 belts simultaneously. That's all I'm saying. And that's a key component of it. Like, in order to be undisputed, you had to actually have been undisputed. In order to be undisputed, you had to have held them all at the same time. You were unified. You were unified champion. You were never undisputed. And Tyson Fury knows the difference between the two. And this is another point. I'm glad you said this. It's disrespectful to the guys who actually achieved it. Exactly. It's undisputed in the 4-belt era is an incredibly difficult thing to do because you have to not only compete against the other top competition in the division, but you have to hurdle everything that's put in your way politics-wise in the boxing world. For Canelo, it's a little easier, right? Because he has all the leverage as the A side. He's the big money fight. So it's easier for him to be generous with his money, B-side money, and say, I want this guy, I want this guy, I want this guy. So he doesn't have those obstacles in the way, but he still has to go through those guys. He had to go through those guys at 168. He's going to have to go through Bivol and Beterbiev at 175. Charlo and Castano have to go through each other. Crawford had to go through guys at 140. Spence and Crawford had to go through guys at 147. But they know how difficult it is to win those belts, hold them. In order to hold them, you have to be able to defend them. And that's a key part of this conversation because Fury wants to claim he was undisputed. He didn't do the work to become undisputed because he didn't defend his belts after he beat Klitschko. He had 3 major belts. And then Wilder took the WBC from Stavern. So that fight was undisputed was 1 fight away for him. Back then, he could have actually achieved this 7 years ago is the point. He didn't do it. He didn't go through that fire. So you can't 7 years later claim that, yeah, I actually did it. No. The revisionist history doesn't work. But I like this point is it's disrespectful to guys who actually went through that fire and achieved it. And in order for Fury to really achieve this, in order for him to do it, and it's doable for him, that's the frustrating part. And maybe the retirement talk is leverage, but this is a doable feat for him. If Usyk is just a blown up middleweight that you would just slap around the ring, why not fight him for $40 million? You can fight a blown up middleweight in front of 94,000 fans, and you just fought White for $33 million. So that tells me that an undisputed fight, you'd make even more, 40 million plus, let's say 40 to 50 million. I'm just throwing numbers around, but it would make sense that he'd make more for the Usyk fight than he would for the Dillian White fight. So if Usyk is just a blown up middleweight that you would slap around, should be an easy fight, right? For all the marbles, a lot of money, biggest payday of your career. Why not do it? Why not do it? Unless he's capping. Unless he's worried about Usyk. I can't get that Joe Rogan interview out of my head when Joe Rogan asked him the toughest fight of his career, and he says it was Steve Cunningham. And he says it was Steve Cunningham because Steve Cunningham was smaller, quicker. He didn't know where the punches were coming from. And Cunningham was hitting him with punches early that hurt because he was quicker than Fury and smaller than Fury. I can't get that out of my head when I think about Usyk. Usyk's small, Usyk's quick, Usyk's technical. Usyk doesn't waste any shots. He doesn't waste any movement. I'm not saying Usyk would beat Fury. I just think that Fury knows that Usyk is a tough fight. And he's trying to lie about it by saying it wouldn't be a tough fight. And we're assuming Usyk gets past Joshua again. But I just think his energy has been much different since Usyk got those 3 belts. Fury's. That's all I'm saying. I think he's worried about that fight. I'm not saying he's scared. I'm not saying he's ducking. I'm just saying the energy looks a little bit different. And I'm also saying Tyson Fury knows he was never undisputed. To be undisputed, you had to actually have been undisputed. People are going to start saying, what has Usyk done if that fight happens? Look, people can say what they want, but Usyk has already proved his greatness. Usyk has already proven that he's a top 2 to 3 pound for pound guy. He's proved it. You win 7 of the 8 major belts at cruiserweight and heavyweight and do it in under 20 fights, you're a special fighter. That's all I got to say about that. And he needs to keep adding to that. Obviously, he needs more than 19 fights, 20 fights. He needs to keep adding to that. But from everything I've seen, he wants to add to his legacy. I think he's worried about Usyk. That's why he hasn't actually announced his retirement. I think he's waiting it out for AJ Usyk too. If AJ wins, he won't retire. But if Usyk does, he will. And another thing to point out is Fury has said that they should give the WBC belt to if they strip him of it, Deontay Wilder should get a shot at that. And I would agree with that. But how long does he have before they strip him of that? Is another thing to keep in mind. I don't think they're going to strip him. There's no way they're going to take a possible undisputed fight off the table, big money fight. But we'll see. Fury's inconsistent with what he's saying at the end of the day. And he was never undisputed champion of the world. On that note, man, lunch is ending. God bless y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in.